Good afternoon, everyone. Officially now, my name is Alexandra Tsvetkova, and together with Georgina Humphries, we are going to talk about the TREIO project, the tools that we have developed in supporting professionals when they're exchanging EIOs. But we are also to present a little bit of what's going on European level in the digitalization of judicial cooperation proceedings for those who are not aware of these developments. So this is the agenda for the day. First, we are going to go through the various initiatives in the digitalization process and how TREIO relates to that activities. And then Georgina will briefly present the TREIO eLearning course, how this could help practitioners to enhance their knowledge in the EIO exchange processes, but also for very experienced professionals, how they utilize the use of the dedicated e-evidence digital exchange system, specifically developed for EIO exchange purposes. Then I will discuss in a brief what is our version of an eEDES simulator and how it could continuously support professionals along their way. And we end up the webinar with how to use and how to sign up for these tools firsthand, but also we'll leave a sufficient time for your questions, whatever they might be. We already have some questions from the registration forms that we'll opt to discuss, but then we will rely on you to share your own concerns. As already mentioned, just before we started the recording, you're free to ask your question by raising a hand, but if you prefer your audio or video not to appear in this recording, please state your comments in the chat and we read them out loud for you. So let's first start with what's going on EU level. And in order to understand where we stand now, we need to go back a bit and see where all this has started. Some of you may be aware of some of these topics, but others may feel this is new for them. So we'll just briefly go through all the most recent initiatives. So a couple of years ago, the Commission started supporting or initiating a number of projects and initiatives in the field of digitalizing the judicial cooperation procedures. And all these projects more or less relate to how to exchange information in cross-border transactions via electronic means and how to exchange evidences in this regard. So it all started with a project initiated by a number of member states back in 2010. And the result of that very first initiative came in 2016 with a secure communication channel for data exchange known now as the eCodex system. So considering how successful was the result of this very first experiment, there were a number of follow-up and spin-off projects dealing with different use cases in the judicial cooperation field. But the Commission itself recognized the use of such a secure communication channel, and in the next years, they supported this initiative. And after a couple of years of negotiation, the regulation, a regulation on the operationalization of the eCodex system in practice was adopted in 2022. And the regulation itself defined specific rules, responsibilities in the overall legal framework of how to operate the eCodex system, which is now the European communication system on exchanging data and documents for judicial cooperation purposes. Along this process, back in 2016, the Commission, recognizing the benefits of having e-Codex, decided to invest in the development of e-evidence digital exchange system, which is also now known as the e-reference implementation software. And the idea back then was to pilot a common tool for all member states that could help them digitalizing the different judicial cooperation procedures. And considering that at the time the EIO directive was just coming into application, they decided to pilot this initiative exactly with regards to the digital exchange of European investigation orders, mutual legal assistance forms, and interception of telecommunication notifications forms. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, the negotiation processes regarding the features of this system and its launch were delayed several times. It was finally launched in May 2022. And to date, there are 11 member states who have joined the digital exchange processes of EIO using this platform in a piloting mode. There are at least 5 or 6 joining the platform in the next couple of months. They're quite advanced in these processes, but there are also others who are a bit slow in adopting the system, and yet they will run it within 12 to 18 months. You can see the member states who have already successfully piloted the eEDES system on the screen. When I speak about the piloting mode, this means that these member states have engaged a small number of competent authorities to pilot the solution so that they could evaluate the further benefits of it, to monitor the behavior of the system before adopting it nationwide. And in reality, some of these member states are actually discussing the nationwide adoption. The way the system was implemented on national level varies. Some of the member states, and this goes back to a comment of one of our participants right before we start. So some of these member states have adopted the eEDES system as a standalone system separate from their case management system. Others have integrated it with their case management system to provide for a more simultaneous workflow on national level. Hungary is the only one that actually started using the eEDES system in all their prosecutors' offices at once. But unfortunately, their e-Codex connection is not stable yet, so they use the system solely for producing the forms, but not exchanging them yet. So this is still to come in the next months. So there is a variety of approaches. And where a member state was delayed in this voluntary adoption, even in a piloting mode, it was mainly due to designing the right strategy for their national authorities, how to better utilize the system provided by the Commission. Now, these are the most recent developments from a technical point of view. However, they go along with a number of developments that concern different operative and legal aspects. So simultaneously to these processes that we have just been discussing, in December 2021, the Commission initiated a legislative proposal package on the digitalization of judicial cooperation that resulted 2 years later in a number of legislative acts. The most important for our conversation is the regulation on the digitalization of judicial cooperation and access to justice in cross-border civil, commercial, and criminal matters, which, among commenting on explicit new rules for different supporting tools, also amend 8 other legislative acts in the judicial cooperation domain, and further support making the exchange of different judicial cooperation document and information under different judicial cooperation instruments via electronic means mandatory over time. So this regulation is already in force. It applies from 1st of May 2025, and its application starts with the service of documents and taking of evidence for civil and commercial purposes. Now, this new regulation delivers on specific rules for video conferencing and other distance communication technologies used in oral hearings. It also comments on the electronic communication and what are the specific rules in this regard between natural and legal persons or their representatives and the respective competent authorities. It covers the recognition of documents signed with electronic signatures or electronic seals for the purposes of the judiciary, and also provides for specific rules for the payment of fees through electronic means in the context of the different judicial procedures. However, what is most important for the purposes of this particular conversation is about the fact that through this regulation, the communication pursuant to a total of 24 different legislative instruments mandates that, so the regulation mandates that this communication will be carried out through the secured communication channels provided on European level, referring to the eCodex system. So eCodex will become mandatory to be used for all these judicial cooperation instruments covered by the 24 legislative acts. On top of that, the regulation also comments on the availability of the reference implementation software, which is in fact the e-evidence digital exchange system, that will be provided by the European Commission and could be used by the member states in all situations where they don't have a national IT system in place to facilitate that communication. Now, 24 legislative acts, meaning 24 legislative instruments in the judicial cooperation domain, seems quite a lot to be enforced in a single, with a single action. And this is why there is a roadmap for the digitalization of the different judicial cooperation instruments. As I said, this process from an operational point of view will be initiated in 2025, making the use of eCodex mandatory for the service of documents and taking of evidence in civil and commercial cases. And then there is a step-by-step implementation of these measures for all the 24 judicial cooperation instruments. Considering the we are now talking specifically about the European investigation order. You can see it here in the so-called third batch of judicial instruments. And the use of eCodex will become mandatory for the purposes of EIO exchanges in 2028. The use of eEDES is not mandatory in that sense, solely the use of the eCodex system. But as I said, the member states should either find a way to develop their own national solution in the process, or they could opt for using the eEDES system provided by the European Commission. And this whole process of digitalization should last no longer than 2031. So the next 7 years will be quite interesting in that context. This is a bit of a technical slide, but I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to the architecture of all these solutions. So you imagine you are the competent authorities right here on the very right side of your screen. And your competent authority have opted, So opted for using the reference implementation software for EIO exchanges. This eEDES instance communicates through an eCodex communication point using the eCodex secure communication channels with another member state where it connects to a different eCodex communication point and a different instance of the eEDES system. This is so technical, you don't need to bother yourself with this technical aspect. What's important is that this whole exchange takes place via a secure channel that is designed specifically for the purposes of judiciary. And it is designed with a great involvement of the member states, so to make sure that everything obliges not only the European requirements, but also the different specifics on national level. And this is how the eEDES itself looks like. So whatever platform used in your member state, it will be the same platform used ideally on the other side. So it will be common for all. It's quite user-friendly, quite intuitive, I would say. And what is very important to be mentioned here is that with the introduction of every new judicial cooperation instrument, it will become easier and easier for professionals to get familiar with these new digitalized procedures, because the framework of the system itself, the main features and functionalities will remain the same. How you sign a document, how you use auto translation, how you go through the workflow of the different procedures. This will remain the same. The only thing that will change will be the forms and the attached legal and operational requirements linked to the specific judicial cooperation instrument in question. During my last part on the eEDES simulator, I'll briefly show you how the system feels and looks for those of you who are not familiar with the system. One important feature that has been found quite useful from a lot of trainees already is the automated translation. Being automated, it is not a substitution for the official translation needed under the EIO directive or the other judicial cooperation instruments, but it provides for a lot of support and could be very helpful when it comes to urgent cases or for purely operational purposes. This reference implementation platform is available in all European languages. So you may use it in your national language, in English, or in any other language that you feel comfortable with. And it will look and feel exactly the same, no matter of the state or the language that it is used in. So all of this is happening just now. Why do we speak about TREIO at this particular moment of time, and how TREIO can help you go along with all these initiatives? This is a EU-funded project. It was conceived in 2019-2020 period, when we were just at the beginning of all these initiatives, and they were still under negotiations between member states and the Commission, and how all the different features and applications should look like. Even at the time, we recognized the need, on one hand, to align in a way, the implementation of the EIO procedures through a common training, but also to use this common training framework to show the professionals how they can successfully exchange EIO forms through this new e-evidence digital exchange system. So we started first with developing training materials for person-to-person training. It covers legal, business aspects, but also the use of the system. And it runs through the different modalities of the EIO procedure, the different staging of filling in or receiving an EIO. It is easily adaptable to the different national contexts, and there are specific guidelines on how, for example, a Dutch trainer could take these materials and transform them for the purposes of a national training, taking in mind all the case law, all the different peculiarities of the national workflow in regard. The original training set is in English. It was later on translated into 16 different languages. And during this process, we have also conducted a number of train-the-trainer, online training activities, but also a number of awareness events. Some of you may have participated in those. Others are just taking part in the ones that we are currently conducting. But during all this time, we realized that this is a very slow process. I mean, engaging people into person-to-person training is a very slow and demanding for the participants process. So we have designed an e-learning course that it is adapted to the needs to both professionals that are quite experienced with the EIO exchanges, but also to participants who are new to the job or have little day-to-day interactions in this regard. And on top of that, we build the so-called TREIO eEDES simulator. So this simulator is built on top of the actual eEDES system. So when you enter the simulator, you are using an exact replica of the original eEDES system run by the Commission. And we had built on top of that a number of training exercises that could be engaged in the self-learning process. So our simulator, following the name, simulates different interactions to support you better understand or exercise using the system on your own. And now we are at the very final stages of the TREIO project, where we aim to provide different target groups with the guidelines and methodologies on how to take upon all these materials and use them on their own. Some of these guidelines cover specific needs of trainers, specific needs of competent authorities, and the webinars like this one, along with the access to these tools, facilitates the needs of the end user professionals who are engaged with the EIO exchanges on a day-to-day basis. So I will now give the words to Georgina to present you with the e-learning course, and then I will come back to the eEDES simulator and explain you how it works. Georgina?
Thank you, Alex. Much appreciated. So as Alex mentioned, I will cover some aspects related to the e-learning course and in regard to the eEDES platform too. So we have some key elements to the TREIO online training. We have an e-learning platform which has been set up for the purposes of piloting the e-learning and use afterwards. We have the TREIO online self-paced training. So this is the content itself, the materials. We have select language versions, and then we have the complementary TREIO eEDES simulator, which goes with the training to provide some real-time training experience. And all in all of those things accumulate to make the TREIO online training and a tool for self-paced learnings on the EIO and eEDES. There are various use cases of the TREIO training package. We've come up with 3 distinct uses. We have 2 training packages. In fact, we have a full training package and we have an eEDES training package, which is a shorter condensed version of the full training package, containing more specifically things on the eEDES platform, whereas the full package contains information on the EIO directive, as well as EIO forms and other aspects around more theoretical concepts too. As you can see here, we've also manipulated, I guess, the full package in some way to allow for a refresher training, where it allows professionals to either be instructed or to self-reflect on their own awareness and skills and actually cherry pick some of the content from the full package to perform some refresher training and help boost knowledge in areas where maybe it's infrequently used, or just where a refresher is needed to accumulate some information. There are several benefits we feel of the TREIO online training, the most obvious being increased awareness of all the aspects included, so the EIO directive, so legislative matters, EIO form, and the use of eEDES for transferring digital evidence and forms, etc. The training has a user-centered and a very active learning approach, so there is no instructor. To lead the training is very much the responsibility of the professionals themselves, but this allows for greater flexibility and accessibility, and allows for training on more of an ad hoc or sporadic basis. So we realise that professionals are highly busy. You might not have a week to take out of work to attend some training on the EIO or eEDES, and instead might be able to perform a few hours here and there in a self-paced environment. And obviously it helps increase the professionals' confidence and awareness and use of the eEDES platform, using the TREIO eEDES simulator as a safe environment to do so in terms of training. We had and still have several aims and objectives. More precisely, that obviously there's a major need for everyone to have a structured knowledge of the EIO directive and EIO procedures for anyone handling anything EIO related or working with the eEDES. To identify investigative measures and overcome typical difficulties in the application of an EIO from observed things that we have observed over different member states during the person-to-person trainings. We also have the need to identify procedures for transmission and receipt of an EIO, and actually work with the workflow hands-on using the TREIO eEDES simulator, and again to learn how to use eEDES more effectively by using our TREIO eEDES simulator as a safe haven to do so. So a well-rounded knowledge at the end, hopefully, in the fact that everyone should have some awareness of the legal assistance and cooperation in the judicial process, but also this in the context of the EIO and in the context of eEDES and how it can be utilised. The e-learning content is a self-paced online course, as I have said. It's 1 week duration for the full training package and 2 to 3 days for the eEDES package. While I say 1 week, it's not really a week. It will take you a shorter time than that, but a week would allow for downtime. It will allow for reflection. It will allow for practice, and it will allow you breaks in between as well. The master copy of the e-learning is in English, and we target various stakeholders in the EIO workflow, whether you be a judge or a prosecutor or administrator or everything in between who may be handling EIOs and the eEDES system. And we have some select translations for the course materials. In terms of the training overview, each package, both short and long, have 5 modules. They're just differing in sizes and slightly different content, but there is common content on eEDES throughout both. We have several take-home exercises, as they're called here, but essentially they're practicals within the training, and we've listed just 3 bullet points here in the areas that they focus on. However, there are several exercises which I will come back to later, and then we have the TREIO eEDES simulator, which complements everything and is used to follow through the EIO workflow within the modules, but also to perform the exercises and other demonstrations. The content is full of theory and practice. We have included procedures and best practices and legal requirements and case law, etc. But we've also included visual elements such as videos, demonstrations, tutorials, and some simulations, so that you're able to practice the skills necessary not only to use eEDES, but to simulate the EIO workflow. And the content very much resembles that workflow from start to finish in the way that we've organised it. We have some quizzes and an exam at the end for self-assessment and reflection and evaluation. And as I mentioned, the previous exercises, which I'll come to in a bit. So just to flick through briefly, we have some text-based content. We also have graphics and sometimes animations that are clickable or in the form of videos. And this is an example of a short video we have. Each video includes subtitles. We have tried to avoid in most cases, however, short videos do contain some sound. But in long videos or Demonstrations, we have avoided sound because we realize you might be in an office environment or working with other people around you and sound might be impossible. So we have used subtitling. We have some quizzes and the exam appears in a similar format to the quizzes as well. We have the demonstrations that I mentioned, which are usually videos of a specific section of the EIO workflow or something that we think is super important for you to be aware of. As mentioned, they also include subtitles rather than sound, but they can be played back, slowed down and paused for your convenience. And we recommend that people either follow along with the TREIO eEDES simulator or perform the same tasks after using the simulator as a safe haven to do so. Demonstrations, we have a short example here, which we won't play the full version of, but just to show briefly, the videos are usually broken down into sections. We have subtitling. Obviously you saw there was English here, but if there are the select languages, then it will also be in those languages. Each of the subtitles is either short or longer, depending on what we need to fit in. And then we have the chunks along the bottom, which are how the video is split up. And it's usually split up into specific sections or specific parts we want you to know about. And then you will also have some additional information sometimes on the right-hand side from this little document plus button, where we tell you things that we think you need to know. So in this case, it's searching for a competent authority, because this is the point that we are at in the demo. We also have some embedded simulations. So while we have the TREIO eEDES simulator, we also have some simulations embedded into the course itself. And as you will see in a moment, the simulation is exactly as you would do in real life as well. We start with a new request. In this case, it's for an ITM. And you're able to click on the elements which you would normally click on in eEDES. The only difference is you cannot manually type any text into this simulation, so we have performed that task for you and you follow through as if you were carrying out the task. And we also recommend that professionals after go into the TREIO eEDES simulator and then perform the same tasks again, just as a form of memory recollection, etc. As I mentioned, there are several practical exercises. We have a minimum set, but we actually have quite a few. So we have 10 exercises in total, and each exercise for the first 7 at least has 2 parts to it. We have the first part, which is a practical exercise with a scenario and a task, as you can see on the right-hand side, but also it has a set of instructions. So we will say, please do A, B, C, D, E, and we will tell you specifically what to do using the TREIO eEDES simulator. The second example will be just a exercise and a scenario and a task with no set instructions, and you're expected to log into the TREIO eEDES simulator and perform that task without guided instruction. The training has been designed for all stakeholders, so we've considered various end users in the judiciary professional areas, including judges, prosecution, and other administrators or clerks. There will be access to both online training packages, so the full version and the short version, and then people are able to perform whichever is best suited for their role and their previous knowledge. We have the quizzes and final exam embedded in each package. But then when it comes to the packages, albeit we have said it's self-paced and doesn't need a trainer, if competent authorities wished to embed a trainer in this course, then it would be possible, as we have supplied some extra files such as storyboards and solutions to those quizzes and exercises and examinations. And then we have designed some materials for the competent authorities as well. So we have all materials that we've provided to the trainers, but we also have the developer files. So all images, graphics, text content, video files, all these things that are embedded in the training itself available, and a developer manual, which basically maps out the content and how it's structured in the developer files. And now I will hand back to Alex, who will show you more about the eEDES simulator and the EIO business workflow in this regard.
Thank you, Georgina. So all these materials that we have developed in the very beginning of the project would serve the purpose of a face-to-face training. So what would happen in a real-time situation? You are on one side of the system, sending or receiving EIOs, and there is a professional on the other side doing the same thing on behalf of their own competent authority. This type of interaction is usually a classic one for a person-to-person training, where you interact either with your peers taking part in the same training or with the trainer leading the training. However, in a as part of an e-learning course in a self-paced environment, just like the one Georgina presented, this type of interaction is no longer possible. So what we have tried to do is to compensate for the missing partner by introducing the TREIO autoresponder. So the purpose of this autoresponder, it is embedded in the TREIO eEDES simulator that we have created. And the purpose of the autoresponder is to react to, within these predefined scenarios, to react to your own behavior while issuing or receiving EIOs, and provide you with feedback depending on the different scenarios that we are trying to go through. So again, this is a bit of a technical slide, but I just want to again make sure that we are all aligned on how this could potentially work. So for the purposes of the TREIO project, we actually installed a real eCodex communication point that is linked to the real eCodex communication network. And our eCodex communication point is linked to our own instance of the eEDES system, being the TREIO simulator. As I mentioned, the TREIO simulator explores the actual system of the Commission, making a completely independent copy of it, a replica of that system with all the features and functionalities there are. But this allows for a safer training environment where whatever you do, it does not interfere with the actual EIO processes going on EU level. So every time when the professional using the eEDES, TREIO eEDES simulator, every time when they perform or initiate some kind of a communication exchange, it goes through our communication point of eCodex, through the eCodex channels, but it does not go to a competent authority on the other side, but all this information goes to our TREIO autoresponder, the information of which and all the exercises are contained in the learning course. So this closes the loop, providing for real-time simulation of this communication without interfering with the actual processes going on. For the purposes of the e-learning course, but of course they can be used standalone, we have developed 10 training scenarios, as Georgina just mentioned. 7 of them cover different aspects that relate to filling in and sending an EIO. So these 7 scenarios concern the issuing state, the issuing authority. And then there are other 3 that covers different aspects on the receiving side. So what kind of actions could be performed by the receiving competent authority. Each of these scenarios follows a if-then behavior. So we provide you with instructions of how to go through the different sections of Annex A, for example, what information to fill in here and there. And based on performing these activities, the autoresponder provides you with the feedback recognizing this or that activity or this or that text filled in during the exercise. And based on this feedback, you can experience how it could look in real life to receive an EIO, for your EIO to be rejected, for example, or to receive a request for additional information. And as I already mentioned, these predefined scenarios that you see on the screen try to cover for the most common steps during the process. And we have tried to cover for them with this auto-responding aspect that we have designed. So I will just give you a couple of examples how this works in reality. So if we are going through a scenario where you would like to issue an EIO, for example, you log into the eEDES simulator, and then you assume the role of the issuing state. And then the TREIO autoresponder will act as the executing state. So every time when you send an EIO or any type of communication in that regard, you send it not to a random competent authority somewhere in Austria or Bulgaria, but you send it to the TREIO autoresponder. And then based on the different scenarios, the autoresponder will react in the respective way, simulating a real response. Vice versa, if we're exploring scenarios where you would like to execute an EIO. So you will enter the eEDES simulator assuming the role of the executing side. And then in order to act upon a received EIO, you need to first to receive it. And this is where the TREIO autoresponder comes in again, acting on behalf of the issuing state. And depending on the scenario, the autoresponder can issue for you an acknowledgement of, so they issue an EIO that provide for training of different modalities. And then you can act upon and train yourself how to acknowledge the receipt of an EIO, how to request additional information, or for example, how to reject an EIO. So these are the very basics of the use of the simulator. And now I would like to show you how this simulator looks and feels. Each of you taking part in this webinar will receive access details, complementary access details to all these features. So you will receive in the next days username and password on how to access the simulator and the e-learning course and explore these tools on your own. So you go to this link that you see here. The browser opens for you, and then you use the, sorry, okay, something happens here, but I think you should see enough of the simulator. So you enter the username and the password that you receive, and you sign in. So let me just sign in again. Okay. And now you enter the eEDES instance that we have deployed for TREIO purposes. As I mentioned, this is an exact replica of the, let me just close this so it makes it more clear for you. Okay. So this is exact replica of the real eEDES system, with all the features and functionalities there are in the system. This is your username, the one that we give to you for exploration purposes. And then you can see your profile. For training purposes, we have given full rights to all the professional accessing the simulator. In real life, you have only the rights that are given to you by a competent authority. You could be the author of the EIO, you can be the reviewer, the signer, the sender, depending on the roles in your institutions. But here for the eEDES simulator, you go through, you have the full access rights to explore all these roles. The different activities that you can perform under these roles are explained in the user manual for the system. but also in the e-learning environment. And in the e-learning environment, we not only comment on the features of each role, but also explore being in that role along the way. As I mentioned, this is how the system would look and feel no matter of the judicial cooperation instrument. The only thing that will change will be the forms and the respective details linked to those particular instruments. However, the main functionalities will remain the same. The system is available in all languages. You can switch from one language to another at any point of the process. And it also provides for automated translation of the EIO forms or specific fields. So you can easily go through the unreceived EIO, for example, even if it's in a language that you don't understand. Again, this is not a substitution of the official translation, but it could help you from an operational point of view. The very basic feature here is to initiate a request. And when you click on starting a new request, you need to select the type of request that you want to send. Currently, the system is designed for EIOs, MLAs, and ITNs. And then all the next judicial cooperation instruments will be visible through this feature. So, for example, when the different forms will be developed for the service of documents or taking of evidence in civil and commercial matters, these judicial cooperation instruments will appear here as well. Let's select an EIO investigation order request. And then we type in the subject of request. For example, bank information needed. It's up to you how you name your request to make it as clear as possible on the other side. And then you initiate a new EIO request. Every time when we initiate a new request, we see this type of a window. So in the very beginning, there is an overview of all the details regarding this request. And when you go through the different stages of filling in the EIO, sending it, receiving additional requests from the other side, all these information will be easily visible through this overview. And I will go to a received EIO later on just to see how this overview dashboard changes over time. When you have already a lot of communication established in the process, you'll be able to see all the documents attached to this EIO exchange. You can also see whether there are any other professional assigned to this particular case on behalf of your institution that you need to collaborate with, and what are their roles in the process, and so on. Now we are entering the system on behalf of the eEDES, of the issuing state. And you can see here that the instance that we use is the eEDES simulator. And once we send our EIO to the TREIO autoresponder, it will appear here as the executing authority, and it will send us automatically feedback to what we have done. The most important part is, of course, filling in the EIO. And here you can find Annex A with all the different sections that needs to be filled in with their own peculiarities. I'm not going to go through all the sections. This is not an EIO training, but you can explore the different modalities at any point once you receive access. However, if you're unsure whether you have processed everything, because first there are mandatory fields that you need to go through. Unlike the paper version of the form, where you may opt out from different options, there are explicit mandatory fields here that needs to be filled in. They are marked with the red star, so you know that they are mandatory from the very beginning. And then you can validate your form, meaning you can explore whether all the mandatory fields are filled in before you proceed. And there are interlinks between the different sections. So sometimes when you perform an action in section C, for example, it reflects on a modality in section F. I'm just spitballing here. It's not an precise example, but this is how it works. And now you can see where we had missed something. So you go back to those sections in red and fill in the information that you need to fill in. The other important part, just to complete this thing, at this stage, the only action that we can perform is actually completing the EIO once we finalize filling in the form. And this is exactly what we can do in our workflow. But every time when you go from one stage to the next, the different actions that you can perform as part of the workflow will change. And they will be the only actions that you can take upon for that particular stage. And once I go to a received EIO, you'll see how these modalities change. One important feature here is the event and message timeline. So here you see all notifications coming from the eEDES system and the eCodex system regarding your message flow under this particular EIO exchange. So you know at any point of time where you stand in terms of this particular exchange. If you go back to the dashboard, you will see all the issued requests, all the received requests, and all the drafts. Considering this is a dummy account that we use for the purposes of these webinars, we haven't issued any requests so far. However, if you go to the received request, you will see a number of requests that have been already issued by your peers in different trainings that we have performed. And if we go to one of these received requests, let me see, yeah, this is a good example. So if we go to one of these received requests, you'll see how the overview changes. So this is an EIO that was generated by the TREIO autoresponder, and then the user acting via the eEDES simulator replied with Annex B. And this is the current status of the EIO exchange. So there were no requests for additional information. Annex B is just issued, but we have not reached an outcome of the EIO exchange. You can also see here, we don't have other professionals assigned to our case, but we can see at the same time all the documents that are part of this exchange. And you can see also all the deadlines that apply to this particular exchange, depending on what is needed for this particular case. You can also see how the original Annex A looked like, how Annex B looked like when we acknowledge the receipt of the EIO. But as I mentioned, the event and message timeline is key here. So if you go there, you see what is the development of this exchange and at what moment what happened. Now, this is quite a straightforward exchange, but in some cases, when you have a lot of messages exchanged, you see the chronology of these exchanges here. You can easily access all the documents that are exchanged or the different messages, if there are any messages in the process, and so on. Again, going back to the dashboard, you can check, for example, the catalog of issued requests, received requests, or drafts. And each of these sections contains a number of search filters that could help you find the case that you're looking for, but also filter the different requests depending on their status quo. So whether we are looking for received only, closed cases, withdrawn, deleted, and so on. So this is like the very basic, the very brief overview of the system. You can initiate in the very same way an MLA or an ITN, and then you'll see how the forms changes. For example, if we decide to go for MLA now, we select the MLA, we try testing an MLA request, and then we initiate it. And then you have the overview again and the event message timeline that goes with it. But the form that we need to fill in corresponds to the form for an MLA request. And this is how the change between the different judicial cooperation instruments will follow in future. So as I said, this is like the very basic of how you use the eEDES simulator. And depending on the exercise that you want to work with, the autoresponder gives you feedback as per the instructions in that respective exercise. So going back to my original presentation, how can you sign up for these tools? As I already said, each of you will receive complimentary access to both the eLearning course and the eEDES simulator. However, there are also other materials that could be useful, either for you as a practitioner, or in case if you're acting from the position of a trainer, or you would like to inform your competent authorities about these tools. You can go to the TREIO website. There is a toolkit section, and there in the next 10 days, we'll gradually upload information concerning the training materials, the different language sets, and additional information on all the electronic tools that we provide. It's not there yet, but it will be coming. And once we complete this upload, we also notify you over email, so you can just go there and work with all the materials. Now, if you're forwarding information about this webinar, this particular presentation, or the recording to one of your colleagues, they could apply for accessing the e-tools on their own by using the link that you see on the screen. Don't bother to write it down at the moment. You will receive both the recording and the presentations within this week. So you will have it in your inboxes. Every time when one apply for accessing the tools, we reply in 3 days' time, providing the respective access details. If you don't find them, just check the spam box first, because we sent a lot of communication and sometimes it goes to the spam box. And if you still cannot find that email, just get in contact with office@treio.eu and we'll do our best to support you in receiving that access. One very important note, not just for you receiving complimentary access, but also for future users. So at the very beginning, you receive one and the same username and platform for all the tools. It's pretty straightforward. You receive an email with all the links there are and the one and the same username and password for all of them. When you log in the eLearning course, following security considerations, you will be asked to change your original password to a new one. And you'll be using the new one for the purposes of the eLearning. However, the original one will remain the same for the eEDES simulator and the autoresponder. So this is quite an important fact, because sometimes people start using their new password again for all the tools, and then there is a confusion in the process. So I think this is all from our side. Maybe Georgina could complement me with some last notes with regards to her practical wisdom in the process. But otherwise, I think it's time for your questions and concerns. Georgina, would you like to pitch in before we give the word to the audience?
Just briefly to say that the TREIO eEDES simulator is meant to complement your training and your professional practice. It's not to replace eEDES. So when you're using it in the training context, it is meant to be a safe environment to practice without realistic and real life personal data, so please do not input any personal data into the simulator. This is why we have provided some exercises with mock data for you to input, and also you can come up with your own exercises as well, and maybe competent authorities can come up with additional national context items as well, but no personal data in the TREIO eEDES simulator. And that the simulator should be used in line with the training online throughout. So there are various aspects to utilize this, and Alex has shown you some of the eEDES simulator, but you will learn more about the eEDES simulator within the training itself.
We have a number of questions coming in from the registration forms, but in reality, we have already covered them in our presentation. What are the different modalities of using the tools? How can one explore the tools for the purposes of the eEDES system? Or if they are more interested from legal perspective, how can they go deeper in the actual legal aspects of exchanging a EIO? You can find all these modalities in the e-learning course. And another common question was, if I'm representing my competent authority, not just myself, how can we explore all these tools? And I think that Georgina already shared how the content varies depending on the purpose of usage, whether you as a professional use it directly, or you are in a position of a trainer or in a position of the competent authority to better utilize these tools. So I think it's better to give the word to the audience. If you, as participants in today's webinar, have any additional questions or remarks regarding what you've heard. I don't see anything in the chat, but you can speak out at any time.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the demonstration, when you demonstrated the simulator, you chose to fill in an EIO, yes, and you had to make a description of the subject of the EIO. When I saw it correctly, that was a field that could contain at a maximum 255 characters. Does that mean that you can also describe more subjects that you wanted to have addressed? Because in the demonstration you added bank information needed, but the practice is that the most of the EIOs contain the multiple subjects, not only information but also on home search, interrogation, etc., etc. Can they all that kinds of measurements be placed in that field, or is it obliged to send more EIOs with each specific subject?
No. It's not necessary to divide the EIO in that sense. You can just use one EIO for all the modalities that you need to cover, as far as they are in compliance with one another. And then you can fill in the subject field whatever information you feel is necessary for the other side to understand you as easily as possible, but also for you to make a further search more comprehensive. Because in reality, when you issue like 2,000 EIOs, it will be difficult for you to quickly find the right one. And searching by title, for example, if you have the right keywords there, will help you do so. The original instance of eEDES is not linked to the case management system on national level, but there is also a specific field where you can input information about the number of the case as it goes into the case management system. So some participants prefer to make this link in the subject line just to make it easier to find these cases afterwards. But you can also avoid that because it could bring confusion to the other side. What is this number? It doesn't mean anything. And you can just put it in the specifically dedicated field for a national case management, a system number. So this could make it also easier for you to distinguish without confusing the other side.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. If you have any further, I'm aware that the example that I gave is super basic and at a very, very high level. The purpose was not to guide you through the all functionalities, but just to give you an idea of what the system looks like if you haven't seen it. The user manual is quite detailed in the sense of how you move from one functionality to the other. But in reality, the user manual does not cover for any legal aspect or any operational aspects like this one. It's purely on the use of the system. And then the e-learning course tries to complement the user manual, just giving you exactly this legal or operational background that you may need at some point of time. But to be honest, the best way to learn is actually to try, send or receive different EIOs and just to feel it for yourself. Because, for example, when people go from one workflow stage to the next, the different action changes. And sometimes, especially for a first-time entry into the system, it could become confusing. I should be able to do a lot of actions. Why can't I? And then one needs to realize that this is a step-by-step approach. And the best way to explore that step-by-step approach is exactly learning by doing. So I don't know whether the participants have any other questions, but if this is not the case, I would recommend you this. Once you receive the access, just go on the learning course, just go on the eEDES simulator. You will receive access to the user manual. You will receive some further information on the eEDES simulator that could help you better understand the exercises. You also receive the exercises separately from the e-learning course in case you want to opt out from the e-learning course. And just literally play with the system. This is the best way to work it out. And then if you have any questions on the usage of the system, you can always go back to us, either with practical or organizational questions using our email account. You all received emails from that, and it's our main point of contact. And we'll try to reply as soon as possible to your request. So again, don't be shy in that context, just send whatever questions you may have. This is quite a common practice for us already. So it won't be the first time to reply to such requests. And if need be, we can also organize some short conference call in order to support the action. Okay, I see a lot of thank yous coming in. This may mean that you don't have any further questions. So thank you from our side for signing up, for being here, for exploring these opportunities together. And stay tuned for the follow-ups with all the emails and all the information that we've promised. And we will remain available to you in case of any further questions that you may have.